Welcome back, parents, to the Sibling Summit. I am your co-host, Nolly Vongchusri, and I am grateful to have with us Dr. Shannon Schedlich. Oh, did I get it right? Yes, Schedlich,
Yeah,
of Siblings Australia. Welcome, Shan.
thank you so much for having me today.
Shan, I'm really grateful for the conversation that we're going to have and for you sharing your time and your work and your lived experience with us. I'm in awe of how you bring into the conversation of when you have a child with a disability or chronic health illness, the impact on the whole family system, and how
Mm.
you've allowed that to be the focus of your work, and instead of a side piece. And so thank you for being here and sharing your work and your wisdom with us today.
It is a privilege to do this work. I love the work that we do, and I know the impact that it has. So, love being here with you today. Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, I've been grateful for the conversation that we've got to have before hitting record. So I'm looking forward for where we're going to go for parents today. For those who are getting to meet you for the first time, I'll introduce you quickly and then let's dive right in.
Yeah,
Dr.
absolutely.
Shannon, Dr. Shannon Schedlich is an experienced leader and advocate whose work is grounded in both professional experience and lived experience. With a background that spans community development, disability, and government, Shannon combines academic insight with a deep personal understanding of the challenges and strengths that shape families of people with disability and chronic illness. As chief executive of Siblings Australia, she brings people with lived experience into the heart of program design, co-creating initiatives that are evidence-based, inclusive, and responsive to community needs. Drawing on her PhD in Australian history, Shannon has a long-standing interest in how stories, relationships, and social structures shape collaborative well-being. She is passionate about building systems and supports that recognize siblings as vital contributors to stronger, more connected families and communities. Okay, Shannon, let's start off here. Where I know when parents who are joining, they might have a family who shows up where one child or multiple children show up differently in the world, either disability or chronic illness, or maybe they don't know what's going on, but they get that tap, that intuitive tap, something's up. So for parents, and they may be challenged, they're trying to balance so many different things at the same time, and they're navigating terrain where the path hasn't been paved. And I think that's really important because for each family, it's going to be different. And so, what core message would you like to share with the parents that are joining us, parents, therapists, teachers, educators who are joining us today?
Yeah, sure. I suppose the core message for me is if you're coming along to something like this, you're obviously recognizing that your sibling child needs support. And so, you are so far along that path, and that is fabulous. But it is also so important to recognize that that sibling child has just as many needs as any other child in the world, and the complexity that exists within your family. Yes, there is that complexity, but you need to make sure that you are supporting that child as any other child is supported. We've been talking prior to hitting record, as you've alluded to, and I am fully aware of the complexities that a lot of families are facing. We have complexities in our family, and I don't know how much about that you want me to share. But the other little people who live in our house and are growing up in our house have those needs that any other kid does too. So you're showing up here as parents or as other adult people in these little ones' lives, and that's fabulous. Now, how do we actually translate and making sure that we are meeting the needs of all of the kids in the house?
Oh, I really appreciate your perspective. The core of my work is that everybody's needs matter. And I think what can happen is at first you start to focus on one child's needs, and then parents are here because they're like, wait a minute, the siblings. What about the
Mhm.
siblings?
Yeah.
Would you, Shan, share why the topic of siblings and why you've dedicated your work, your life's work, to the topic of siblings, your personal story?
Yeah, sure. A lot of people assume that I am a sibling. I have a brother and a sister, but I'm not a sibling in the way that we use it at Siblings Australia, in that we had no additional needs within our family growing up. And I think I should sort of set that out from the outset, that when I use the word sibling, we're talking about the child who doesn't have support needs, or whose support needs aren't as great as their brother or sisters. So we sort of just use that as a bit of a shorthand here. Um, we are a blended family. In my house, there are 4 kids, 2 that I brought into the relationship, and 2 that I inherited when I went on Tinder 8 and a bit years ago and found my now husband. And the youngest of the kids in our family, his daughter, has profound disabilities. She has level 3 autism. She has a profound intellectual disability. She is non-verbal. She has very low receptive language skills. She's also 6 months younger than my daughter. So when we first met, I think when they first met, I'm trying to put the timeline exactly in place. I think my daughter had just turned 3, and his daughter was just over 2.5 years old. And when we first got together, people would say to us, how wonderful that you've got these 2 girls that can grow up together. And the life paths that these 2 girls are treading are vastly, vastly different. And so, my kids became sibling children by virtue of who I fell in love with. The impacts of having someone who has very, very high support needs in our house obviously has an impact on the other 3 kids growing up with her. So living this life and sort of seeing the impacts, and the impacts aren't just ones that necessarily happen inside our house. We know when we're out in public, impacts on our kids that happen because of their sister. I know through my work, and because my stepdaughter's support needs are so high, she's in a special school, but if they were in the same school, I know that they would be impacted by that from the families that we work with here at Siblings Australia, and what we hear from families about how that can play out in the schoolyard. So yeah, when this role came up with Siblings Australia 3 years ago, our founder was moving towards sort of semi-retirement. I'd say retirement, but she seems to keep working on various bits and pieces. But after having been with the organisation for over 20 years, she was sort of looking at what her step down was from full-time work. So I've now been with the organisation for 3 years in about a fortnight's time, working with families across Australia about how we can support them. I'm also on the board of Ronald McDonald House Charities South and Central Australia, and the impact of chronic illness on families that we work with through that charity also has really driven home the work that we do here at Siblings Australia, and how we need to make sure that the whole family is being supported.
Oh, I really appreciate the work that you're doing. And what I'm wondering, hearing you share that, and thank you for sharing your personal reasons for doing this and for focusing in this area, is what I heard you say is that there are a lot of unseen impacts to siblings.
Mhm.
And I wonder if you would be able to, if we could start with sharing what some of those, shining some light on some of those impacts to siblings that parents often don't realize.
Yeah, sure. I love the shining a light thing too, because it's my background. We've got the shining a light because that is what we're here to do, shine a light on siblings issues, which is not something for viewers. That's not something we discussed prior to right this very moment. Um, but there are a whole range of impacts on siblings, and there are impacts that happen on the sibling children when they are children, and then there are impacts that impact across their entire lifetime. I often think about the fact in our work that there are a lot of supports out there for parents when there is a child who has additional needs. There are support groups, there are peer groups, as a parent of or a step parent of a child with additional needs, there is a lot of focus from my family and friends of how am I doing,
Mhm.
and that's nice. I appreciate that. But I think in a lot of ways we sometimes expect more from our kids than we expect from ourselves. We recognize that this impacts on our lives. We recognize that this is hard. We recognize that there are things that we can't do as a family, and that makes us upset. And we spend a lot of time talking about the resilience of sibling children. And don't get me wrong, I absolutely understand the importance of resilience. And it's something that, we do a lot of work with here at Siblings Australia. But I don't think that should be the end of the discussion around what we're talking about with siblings. The number of times parents say to us, "Oh, I'm really struggling, but oh, kids are so resilient." And I'm like, how do you know? At this point, how do you know? Because they're trundling along with it, because what other option do they have?
Yeah.
Um, so we know that siblings can fall into that thing of thinking they have to be perfect. They can't do anything out of line because mum and dad or the other adult people in their lives are already struggling with so much. So, I'm not going to rock the boat at all. We know that siblings often won't talk to the adult people in their lives about things that are happening because, well, it's not as important as what's happening with my brother or my sister. If your brother or sister is in and out of hospital and we don't know whether they're coming home this time, is the fact that someone's bullying you at school, does that seem as important to you? And so, they don't necessarily have those conversations with the adult people in their lives because they feel like, well, my issues, whatever they aren't as important to me as what's going on within our family. But we also know the long-term impacts that can have. We know that if you are living in a household, and so a lot of the families that we deal with, the disability manifests in behavioural issues. And if you're living in a household where violence is a constant and you are constantly at risk of being hurt by your brother and sister, and the response of the adults around you is they can't help it, you just have to learn to live with it. What sort of messaging is that grounding for you in future relationships? If you walk into a relationship as an adult with someone who is violent and their response is, "I'm really sorry, I couldn't help it." How do you distinguish that from what you've grown up with? And so
Yeah.
there are a whole heap of these sort of flow-on effects that I think in the moment, perhaps it's easier to say, well, we'll worry about that later. But this is all foundational. It is all fundamental to how siblings move through their life for the rest of their life. Um, so it is about how it manifests when they're children, but it can impact across the entire lifespan.
Yeah. Yeah. I really appreciate you speaking that and sharing that, Shan, because I think what you're saying is you can have empathy, and at the same time, acknowledge the impact if when there are behavioral challenges, that every child deserves to feel safe in their space. And how do we take care of every family member? And actually, like it's just saying, oh, they couldn't help it, they didn't realize it, they didn't mean it. And to me, what I'm hearing you say is like teaching kids to tolerate mistreatment. And so where I want to go now is like, okay, so parents are like, oh, oops, maybe we've been there. And I love that you brought in like that this is their training ground for long-term relationships, whether we realize it or not. We think we're teaching them, oh, in this one instance, just let it go. But then they're going to take that and translate it in the future. Oh, in this
Mm,
one relationship, just let it go. Right?
yeah,
And
yeah,
that's where it can be detrimental to their well-being as well. So I love this focus on the whole family's well-being and the whole
mm,
family. So could we go into, I think parents fall into that trap of, oh, well, they didn't mean it, so can you just let it go? And
yeah,
I think oftentimes from a place of exhaustion on the parents' part as well. And so the intent, like impact gets dismissed because the intent wasn't there instead of
Yeah.
holding both. Like we can both know they didn't mean it. And oh, it's important to make sure every family member is safe. So could we go into this space of, and I talk with the parents that I support a lot about this, like how do we find that line, that space between tolerating or between accommodating and then it tipping into tolerating? And how can we
Yeah.
support, I've so many different thoughts on this, like supporting siblings to be able to bring their needs forward. And then
Mhm.
also for parents to be able to acknowledge and support the family in that. So, yes,
Yeah.
please go ahead.
Look, I mean, my number one thing would be if you know that there are behavioural issues that put your sibling child at risk and their safety at risk, develop a safety plan for your home.
Mhm.
Um, and yes, ideally, we wouldn't live in households where safety plans are required, but the reality is that sometimes they are. And your sibling child needs to know that you have thought about this and that you are prioritizing their safety, and that you are making sure that they are safe and that they have a space that they can go to. It might even end up being a bathroom. And if there is some sort of meltdown, the bathroom has a lock on the door and you set up a space in there. You set up a space that's perhaps got a little stereo, that's got some music that they can play, that's got an iPad or something, or some books or some colouring books or something. But there is a space that they know if this is happening, I can get myself here and I can be safe.
Mhm.
That's their physical safety taken care of. And that's, in the moment, that's the most important thing. How do you keep your child physically safe? The reality is, though, we're also talking about their emotional safety. And if they are having to remove themselves from situations, if they are seeing your child who has behavioural issues being violent towards you, they're going to be scared. And I think that oftentimes there is so much complexity that goes on in some of our houses that we just become a bit desensitized to it. We become a bit immune to quite how confronting our households can be. And I think it's really important for us to address that. And so having those conversations after the moment has passed about how did you feel about that, and allowing your sibling child the space to be really honest about that and not making them feel guilty about it, talking to them about how you felt scared in the moment, telling them that you were worried, that you felt stressed out, talking about some of the things that you do afterwards after a moment of feeling those sorts of ways is really, really important. And it can't be a one-off conversation. It can't be well, that's happened and it's past. It's something that you need to keep coming back to. And sometimes it's something that you need external support for. I'm a very, very big proponent of seeking that additional support, whether it's counselling, whether it's therapy, whatever it is. But if something has particularly happened within your family that as an adult you're feeling a bit shaky about, recognizing that if you're feeling shaky like that, your little person who hasn't learnt about the world, who hasn't learnt how to process all of those sorts of things, they might be saying to you, I'm fine, I'm fine, I'm fine, because coming back to that point of they don't want to rock the boat.
Right.
Feeling shaky, chances are they are too. And if you're feeling shaky, they're picking up on you feeling shaky. And so chances are that if you're shaky and you're talking to them about how they're feeling, they're going to want to try and support you and tell you that they're fine. So have the conversation with them straight after, but keep coming back to it. I think it's also really important. We all talk about it takes a village to raise a child, but providing that village, finding that village for your sibling children, I think is really important because they might not feel comfortable saying to mum or dad or grandma or auntie or uncle, whoever it is who's in the house who's taking responsibility for the caregiving on a day-to-day basis. They might not feel comfortable having that conversation with you as mum or whoever it is in the home because they are aware that everyone is being impacted by this. So how do you create those adult relationships with other people who you know and trust, that you can build in a way that you know that your sibling child has that person they can go to? You know, is it godparents? Is it a basketball coach who is particularly good at talking to your children? Have you got a teacher this year for your child who really seems to have some sort of connection with them that you can go and have a conversation with and say, hey, can you just keep a bit of an eye? This is some of the things that are going on at home. And providing those additional spaces and people for your sibling child so they have got that network of support.
Oh, I just love that you brought that up because I think, and you not only brought up physical safety, but the emotional and the mental safety as well, where they feel like they have, because I've had safety plans in my own home. We've worked through those things, and it's always the processing after, and even years after, like, oh yeah, do you remember this experience? Oh yeah, what was that actually like? I'd be surprised if you weren't scared too, and giving them permission to feel that feeling and doing what you can to create a container. And I love that you brought in sometimes it's having conversations with other people if they don't feel like they can bring it up with you and making
Yeah.
sure that they have that support in place. Um, and I think that is so important. And it also teaches them that they don't just need to squat, they don't need to disappear in the experience. So thank you for sharing that, Shan, and for sharing this way of supporting them. So you and I, before we hit record, we talked about the sibling relationship and what a unique and special relationship it is. And with each family, it can look different. And I think there can be in the sibling relationship, we're talking about two components in a way. Their short-term relationship, the relationship now, and then their long-term relationship. And with a sibling of a child with a disability or chronic health condition, how do you find that balance and communicate to them and support them in recognizing what's their what where their responsibility is and isn't.
Yeah, we are very, very hot at Siblings Australia at talking about the fact that we're about preserving the natural relationship that exists between brothers and sisters. And this is important for all members of the family. This is important for the child who has additional needs. If you are sort of making the default assumption that because a child has a disability, their brother or sister has some sort of caring responsibility for them. Where's the dignity in that for the child with a disability? So there's that component of it. There's also the component of we don't want to parentify our kids. Kids are kids for, oh my goodness, it goes in a heartbeat. It goes so, so quickly. So, how do we manage to preserve that childhood for all members of the family? How do we make sure that we're not putting too much responsibility on children just because they have a brother or a sister with a disability? We often, when we're talking to adult siblings who have had a lot of caregiving responsibilities given to them when they're quite young, they talk about having burnout from their family, um, burnout from their carer responsibilities by the time they're young adults. Um, and, they'll say, I love my brother or sister, but I need to take a step back from my family because I need to be able to live my own life and I need to be able to do the things that I want to do. And so I can't actually be as engaged as I once was. And that is, as a parent, that is heartbreaking. The idea that my children would get to early adulthood and say, oh, I need a break from all of you. I just can't think about it too long. But from their sense of self, having that is just terrible that they've got to early adulthood and are already feeling burnout from responsibility. But this is the longest relationship of most people's lives. The sibling relationship is there before we have spouses in the picture. It will outlive parents in almost all cases. And so if siblings are burnt out by the time they are early adults, what then happens to the safeguarding that comes from having an engaged family after parents pass? So, if the brother or sister gets to early adulthood and says, I need to take a step back because I've already been burnt out, and mum and dad are taking that view of, well, we're going to do everything ourselves. When mum and dad pass on, who has oversight? Who has eyes on that vulnerable person who has a disability? Who is checking in on them, every week? Who is inviting them around for nieces and nephews' birthday parties? Who is taking them to soccer games on the weekends? If they're living in supported accommodation, who is the sort of those eyes that are checking on them to make sure that they're okay as they're aging themselves? So it's about supporting the siblings, absolutely. But in that long-term safeguarding aspect, it's really important that brothers and sisters maintain some level of engagement for the person with the disability as well. And it's not just that safeguarding, it is that sort of that broader, that joy of life of having the once a week family lunch and the birthday parties with families and Christmases and all of those sorts of things, that if that relationship breaks down, people just don't get to experience.
Yeah. What I heard you saying, and I love it so much, is like by protecting what they're responsible for or not, we protect the sibling from experiencing burnout. We also protect their relationship long term. And it's actually a way to take care and provide safeguarding for the child with a disability or a health condition. Like it's something that is supportive for each member individually in the family system, as well as the family system overall in a sustainable way.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We often talk about how siblings are the greatest sort of untapped resource in families, because they do bring such lovely complexity across the entire lifespan. And complexity complexity is not quite the right word, but they tend to see their brother or sister just as their brother or sister. They tend to see them in a much more egalitarian way than other people in their lives necessarily do. They don't necessarily think about, well, this is Shannon who is autistic. They think this is Shannon who is my sister, and she's really into colouring in books and watching YouTube. Oh, and she's autistic, so they tend to sort of have that view of this is just my brother or sister if they don't have that sort of additional layer of responsibility too early.
Yeah, and I love, could you share, having like you touching on that, could we go into like some of the additional insights that siblings have? Because they're in the child world while also like, and so they're around their sibling, oftentimes in ways that parents aren't, or they see things. I think that's what I heard is they see things about their sibling that others may not see.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've had stories come through of some beautiful examples. And what was something I shared with you before we started recording, and Ali, I'll recount now, was a principal that I spoke to at one point who had worked in a special school. And she was telling me that a game changer that she had made as a principal was when they sent home their end of term report cards. I think these are sort of an international concept. I don't think it's something specifically Australian, but at the end of each school term, you get this is how your child's gone at school this term. And there's a section for the parents to write a reflection or, sometimes just sign or what have you. But this particular principal put in a section for sibling comments. And she said it was a game changer for them because they learnt so much more about the child with a disability and their actual interests and how they were going from the siblings' feedback. And she said, it was sometimes things like Thomas doesn't like going to school because his favourite thing is trains, and they never talk about trains at school, which only a child would offer, right? You know,
Yes.
As an
Yeah.
adult going, well, I'm very pleased to hear that Thomas is now sitting down for 5 minutes every lesson and is more engaged. And that, like, as a parent, that's the sort of things that you're picking out. But feedback like doesn't like school, not enough trains, gave the teachers insight that, well, okay, rather than trying to teach Thomas how to count using the blocks that we've got over here, let's bring in a train with carriages and we can use the carriages and he can count carriages. And when we're doing fractions, we can ask him to split the train in half and those sorts of things. So there's that sort of feedback that siblings have. Siblings also, and I mean, this is siblings regardless of whether there's additional needs within a family or not. Um, but the conversations you have with your brothers and sisters when you're growing up, I reflect back on my own experience. I don't know whether there are any more honest conversations you have with anyone in the world. Um, and so, if a sibling is talking to their brother or sister, and their brother or sister might say, I hate speech pathology. I think that speech pathologist is really, really nasty, and that's why I don't do any of the work that she gives me. If you're having a conversation with your sibling child, if you're bringing them into the discussions around therapy, that's going to be feedback that the child who is going to speech therapy might not offer to the speech therapist or to mum or dad, or they'll just go, yeah, I just don't like speech therapy.
Mhm.
Having the insight that you get from that relationship can just, it can have so many ripple effects. Um, Brothers and sisters often too think sort of more broadly um, around the sort of the life trajectory of their brother or sister. So, I remember not long after I'd started in this role, and someone talking to me about they were that and this they were an older sibling they were talking about when they're both finishing school, and the parents had been thinking about supported employment. Again, I don't know if this is an international concept, but in Australia we have providers who have relatively basic employment options for people who generally have intellectual disabilities. Um, and, it might be factory type work or it might be packaging type work and for a lot of families, it's the right fit. But in this particular case, this now woman said, well, I knew my sister really liked fashion and I worked in a shop. So I got her a job in the shop that I was working in. And it's that sort of, rather than looking at the limitations of the disability, it's looking as the person as what are their interests. And
Yeah.
because they do have that sort of brother, sister, 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 whatever it is, relationship, that's sort of where they default to. And I mean, the opportunities to do those sorts of things, to not just think about, and I say this understanding that parents, when they make those decisions, they're very much making them from a how do I protect my child who has additional needs? I understand completely how scary the world can be as a parent of someone who's got additional needs. So I understand where parents are coming from when they're making those decisions. But in some cases, there is that sort of dignity of risk that siblings allow for that perhaps other people in the lives of people with disability don't necessarily make space for.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love that you brought that in because that's that resilience piece again, too. And allowing, I think, dignity. I really felt that word as you said it, because it preserves dignity for each member of the family as well. When you allow, like, and it shows how capable they are. Like that you can be. One of the things I like to say is I'm a very capable person with a disability. Like I'm a person with a disability and I'm very capable because it means find your way to what, like supporting that child to finding their way to where they feel capable and not letting
Yeah.
it be, oh, well, they have a disability, so that they can't. This is all they can do. And instead,
Yeah.
it sounds like the siblings see them in that light and actually can see what their natural gifts and talents are and help them find something that uses those natural gifts and talents as well.
Yeah,
I think
exactly.
that kind of leads in because you talked about the fears of the parent. They're like, "Ooh, we want to protect them." And so there was one other question. I know that there are like 15 more questions that I could ask you and continue this conversation. I wanted to talk to you about or get your perspective on parental anxiety and the impact on the sibling relationship when the parent is anxious about the child with a disability or chronic health condition.
Yeah, look, I feel a little bit like a broken record when I say I
Yeah.
understand it. But it's that communication piece. If you are feeling nervous, if you're feeling anxious, if you are worried about about the world overall, if you are worried around the chronic health condition and what tomorrow's hospital appointment is going to mean, shielding your sibling child from those anxieties won't lessen their anxieties.
Yeah.
Um, you need to have the conversations with your children because they will pick up on how you are feeling.
Yeah.
And saying to your sibling child, everything will be okay while you're a blubbering mess in the corner is not going to make them feel any better about what's going on.
Yeah, it leads them to not trusting themselves because they can pick up on it. They're attuning to you. They can feel your anxiety, your worry, your fear, even if you're not speaking it, even if you're not crying in the corner, right?
Yeah,
Even if you're putting on a neutral face and walking around, they can feel what's inside of you. So I love that you,
absolutely.
yeah, yeah.
I mean, we often talk in our house about the fact that it's like my kids have some sort of sixth sense. And if I'm feeling a little bit about anything, that's when they will go a little bit out of their tree. And, I'll have to sometimes, as I'm driving home, I'll be like, right, I'm feeling really stressed about that thing that's happening at work. And I have to be really clear with the kids as soon as I get home that that's what's upsetting me. So that
Hmm.
I say to them, you know what? I have got I have got something with one of my reports that I just can't pull together and I'm just feeling a bit keyed up about it. So if I'm a bit grumpy and I'm a bit short, that's what it is. Then I know they'll be fine. If I go home and I just think about the report in my head, that's when, at 11 o'clock at night, I'll be like, oh, why can't you go to sleep? Why can't you go to sleep? So, being upfront with them about any sort of stress, I think is really important. But when it is about their brother or sister, they hold fears as well. They know that something's going on, and talking to them about it, but in a level that's appropriate for their age is really, really important. And talking to them about the fact that it's something that you feel too, and giving them the permission and the space to have those conversations with you is really important. The other thing that kids are fabulous at doing is filling in the blanks, and not necessarily with correct information, not necessarily with anything grounded in reality, but they will pick up bits and pieces of things and they will weave it into a story. So, an example of this, more I heard talking to a family who had had a child who had cancer, and they took the brother or sister, I think it was the sister, in to visit. Um, and everything was actually going really well at this stage. They were about to be released from hospital, they were going home, and all of a sudden their sibling child fell in a hole and they couldn't work out what was going on. And they were sort of like, everything's okay, everything's okay. And she eventually said to them, I know you're lying to me. And they went, what are you talking about? She's better, she's coming home, we'll have to keep doing tests. And this little girl said, I heard them say about the dying. And they were like, what? What are you talking about? And what she had overheard in the hospital was that they were using a dye test to make sure that the cancer wasn't where that they had actually got it all. And because they hadn't sort of talked to her about different bits and pieces, but she picked up sort of snippets of conversations
Yeah.
in her little mind, it had sort of built to, okay, we're bringing my sister home so she can die. When they'd been very careful about not telling her too much about anything. And she'd made up this story that was so having conversations with your kids, being upfront with them in an age appropriate way, also talking about how you feel and being honest with them about how you feel is really, really important because they will pick up on it. Whether you say anything or not, they will pick up on it. Um, and they will also learn that if your default is to say, no, no, everything's fine, then their own response should be, no, no, everything's fine. Um, and if things aren't fine for them, you need to know that. You want to know that as parents.
Oh, can I summarize that, Shan? Because I thought that was so important. If we overuse everything's fine, our kids start to become hyper vigilant, searching for what's actually going on. But what you're saying is when you say everything's fine, you mean it because you also let them know when you might be worried or concerned or results are inconclusive, then they can trust your everything's fine as well when you do say everything's fine.
And if you're being honest with them about all sorts of things, including I don't know what's going on, that gives them permission to be honest with you about how they're feeling about things. And it is, again, that flow on impact across the lifespan of being able to verbalize this is how I feel and this is what I need at the moment to help support me through this.
Yeah. Oh, and even if they don't understand why it is what they need, I thought that was so important. And especially about like helping kids, like because the sibling doesn't need to be on high alert looking for meaning in things where like trying to read between the lines and to give them that ability to rest. And we will tell you, we will be honest. And for them to have that security of, yes, they can trust that and rest in that. And so and we'll be honest when we don't know what's happening yet. We're in a waiting period right now. So I think, oh, okay, clearly there are so many more things that I could keep talking to you about with this topic. And I also want to make sure that we create a conversation that parents can listen to so that they have the time for. Is there one final thing, one final message that you want to share with parents and teachers, educators who are joining us today?
The one final message I would love to share is you don't need to be there every single second of every day. I know that in a lot of our families, there are so many things going on. Uh, so it's not big actions that you need to do that make your sibling child feel like they're being seen and supported. It is taking the moments when they need them. It is showing up for them for the things that matter to them. And it is carving out space in every day just to let them know that they are your priority as well. So, maybe it's a ritual of 5 minutes every day at the end of the day where you sit down and it's just the two of you and you just talk about what's been going on, or you read 3 pages of Harry Potter, or you do something that they know that they have got that time every single day that is just about them, regardless of what is going on, can have a huge impact.
Yeah, I love that you brought that up and brought that piece in. And it doesn't need to be this big, massive commitment. I love it. It could be 3 pages of Harry Potter. We didn't say a whole chapter. Didn't even say half a chapter. You said 3 pages because sometimes that's what you have the bandwidth for, and that stability and consistency is important for them as well. It creates a steadiness. They're seen and known and cared for and important and treasured, as is every member of your family. Ah, Shan, thank you so much for sharing your work, your wisdom, and this very important topic with us today. Where can parents find information about you and Siblings Australia? And then we'll also make sure there's a link on this page for them.
Yeah, sure. So if you head to our website, which is siblingsaustralia.org.au, there are references on there for how to get in contact with us. There are sections on supports for parents. There are sections on support for children. There are also sections on support for adult siblings. So if you've got adult siblings in your life who you think might benefit from our resources, we are also part of an international community of practice. So while we focus on supports within Australia, some of our resources are relevant regardless of where you are. But if you are outside of Australia and you're looking for supports, please get in contact with us, and we have those connections across the world that we can connect you in with to make sure that your family is getting the support that they need to be the best version.
I really appreciate that. This is really important work. It speaks deeply to my heart and my soul and the essence of who I am. So thank you, Shan, for being here. For parents joining us, you'll be able to find that link on this page. And like Shan said, if you are in a different country than Australia and this resonates with you, then please reach out, and Shan's organization, Siblings Australia, will help you get in touch with an organization near, closer to you. Thank you for being here, for sharing your work, for sharing this perspective, for being able to speak into a topic and a space that can be filled with anxiety and worry and fear. And it takes a deep courage and passion and commitment to be able to share. This is a path that is often, there isn't paving for it. And I appreciate you, Shan, being someone that is paving the path here. So thank you for your work.
Thank you for sharing the work that we do and the supports that we've got available for parents. Like I said, parents who are listening to this today are so far down the road of making sure that all members of their family are supported. And if we can provide a few more steps along that pathway, that's fabulous.
Can I ask you one more question? I just got the tap to ask you one more. So, if you were to speak to you from at the beginning of your journey with navigating a family with complexity and with disability and difference, if you were to speak to that younger version of you, what is
Mm.
one thing you would want to say to her?
Ooh. Um, I would probably, can I say two things to her?
Absolutely.
I would tell her to show herself more grace, and I would tell her to spend more time listening to her kids.
Thank you for that.
Mm.
Thank you for sharing your time with us again, Jen. And to those parents watching, I appreciate you being here. Shannon and I appreciate you being here. We know your time is precious and limited, and we appreciate you opening your hearts and your homes to this conversation. Bye for now.